The economy is sending some mixed signals right now, and today we're breaking all of them down, starting with how AI is reshaping the job market industry faster than most people expected. The housing market is cooling off while younger buyers sit on the sidelines, and the latest inflation numbers just came in below expectations. So, what does that mean for you and your money? My name is Matthew White, joined by my co host, Niamki Buchanan, and this is Road to Riches.
All right, welcome everybody back to a new episode of Road to Riches. Last week, we talked a little bit about how the job market is not looking good for white collar workers. We were saying that we're seeing a lot of instances where they're getting fired for various reasons or laid off, and this continues to be the case. We have a story here by Axios saying that now AI is obviously responsible for quite a bit of these job losses. Uh, they write here that the CEO of Anthropic has already stated that they're really anticipating that up to half of all entry level white collar jobs could be eliminated in the next 5 years. There's so much to this story about how advancements can get rid of jobs. But of course, there's a lot of new opportunities that are created through these advancements. I mean, we look at all the major things through history, right? Look at the cotton gin and the assembly line, all these things. There's always been a lot of people that get replaced. There's also a lot of opportunity coming out of that. What are your thoughts on this, Matt?
Certainly. So, essentially, what I've seen in the market is that a lot of employers are coming in and they're cutting their workforces down due to, for example, repetitive tasks, data entry, things like that, and things that AI can do incredibly well, in many instances better than humans can. And I think it's important that we note, that we note that there are companies, however, who have reduced workforces due to AI, or in preparation for the incoming, AI advancements, AI engines, and they're kind of having to claw their workforce back because it's not AI is not delivering what they thought it was delivering before, and a lot of companies are seeing this example in the market, and they're taking notice. They're maybe realizing that while AI is very advanced, AI is very good at simplistic tasks, again repetitive tasks. It still needs an operator to know how to run queries. It needs an operator to know how to essentially be an agent for it. Our agentic AI capabilities, while they're coming, they're not very advanced right now, and so an example is IBM. IBM is, instead of getting rid of its workforce, instead of vastly reducing its workforce, what they're doing is they're retraining their workforce into a little bit more of a face-to-face client role, and allowing AI to do the things that, behind the scenes, do the computer things that are no longer required by humans to do, but allowing their employees, instead of losing their jobs, they're moving them to more of a face-to-face role. And there's some other companies who are doing that as well. Dropbox is another example, of a company who's not really wanting to follow this trend and then maybe get behind the eight ball, because what if it's not what they're expecting, and they certainly don't want to lose, um, their workforce and their production capabilities and capacities, due to a promise that was never actually delivered. Um, But I think it's also really important to address reality here. And the reality is that coming from this, there are going to be people who lose their jobs. It's just a fact of technological innovation and advancement. People are not sewing sweaters by hand anymore. We've come up with the textile mill. We've come up with machines for these things, and so we don't have telephone operators anymore like we did in the well up to the 1980s. And so it's technological advancement. There are going to people who lose their jobs in the short term, but I will also note that the silver lining to that, the economic fact of the matter, is that there has never been, and in my opinion never will be, an economic downturn, certainly not a long term economic downturn, and not even a long term unemployment uptick because of technological innovation. There's this idea in economics, frequently championed by the economist F.A. Hayek, who talked about the idea of infinite work. There's in a lot of employment studies and studies on how much work there is to be done in the workforce. There's this idea that, okay, well, based on surveys, based on interviews, employers actually have so much work to be done, but they can only afford certain amounts of tasks to be done. They only have so much money to hire workers, and those workers only have so much time to do their tasks. And every single time as these technological advancements have happened, once again, the first industrial revolution, the second industrial revolution, we've not only seen an uptick in production, we've seen an uptick in overall employment. Again, Mercedes Benz, when it started to utilize the assembly line, not only kept its workforce, it actually had to hire more people because it was selling cars for so cheap everybody could have one. And that was a point made by Henry Hazlitt in his book Economics in One Lesson. And so we got to keep these things in mind. Obviously, address reality, but also keep in mind that what has happened in history, not forget what has happened in history. And I think it's important that we realize that it's not different this time, right? I know that the doom and gloom says oh, but it's different this time. I'm sure they said the exact same thing when Google came around with the search engine. When we got rid of people sewing, when we got rid of large scale seamstresses, when we created the printing press. And so keep all those things in mind. Um, I honestly, in my opinion, I don't see super bad economic downturns from this either. I expect history to continue to repeat itself, um, as it always has been.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned a lot of creative jobs, and I think it's really important to note that with a lot of those, like you said, these things still exist to some degree. We even though we did automate a lot of the clothing making and things like that, we still have lots of seamstresses and tailors who do small scale stuff, or even custom orders, things like that. When it comes to large scale as well, you look at places like Porsche, right? One of the main reasons why Porsches and other luxury vehicles and luxury items cost so much is specifically because at least part of them is handmade. I mean, McLaren's cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they're pretty much all completely handmade or hand assembled at least. You know, we all these different points in history, the agricultural revolution, the industrial revolution. People may think that because so long ago we finally got around to having machines create all of our metalwork, that now blacksmiths don't exist. No, blacksmithing is still a very, very lucrative and popular trade. These things still exist. And even with some of the things that are not necessarily physical that AI can do, like making art, making music, things like that. So many people, especially our age, have now seen their favorite creators or their artists be basically uprooted by AI, and they're starting to push back. I mean, Disney's putting AI in their movies and TV shows. Netflix is bringing AI content to its platform, and and all the while, people are looking at YouTube thumbnails that are made out of AI, and they're saying, "Hey, you could have paid someone to do this," or they're looking at videos that are obviously AI, and they're saying, "Hey, why'd you get AI to do this? You could have got a person to do it." So that idea that we will be able to completely get rid of the human touch just doesn't make sense. There's always going to be some market, granted a smaller market, but some market for authentic, handmade human products. We still have people that paint, even though we've had AI art for a few years now and it's very good in some cases, right? We still have musicians that make music, even though AI music exists, right? So there's always going to be some level of replacement, but then there's bringing it around to, well, that just means that the people who continue to do things by hand are now going to be significantly more valuable. And it's not even just in the creative spaces either, because even with more rudimentary or rote, repetitive tasks that we're seeing, things that AI will be good at, such as research, data entry, things like that, AI is not even really replacing them there either. We have this other story uh, by Gartner here, and they're basically reporting that they think in the next 2 years, most of the AI, most of the jobs that were early on given up by AI are going to be coming back. Literally says by 2027, 50% of companies that attributed headcount reduction to AI will rehire staff to perform similar functions but under different job titles. And that is like a little bit like you said, where we are starting to move things to be more relational because AI can't necessarily take that. But there's also this idea that, like you said, someone has to program the AI, someone has to prompt the AI, someone has to then check over the AI, at least in the early stages until it gets very good. We have to validate these results that we're getting. There have been um, there was this thread on Twitter that I saw about a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago. Don't know if it's real or not, but this guy basically said that his company had been using AI to analyze their financials more or less and give data insights based on them for the last 3 months, only for him to find out that when one person said, "Let me go check this because these latest numbers don't look quite right," that the AI had been hallucinating everything that they had ever put into it. So nothing that they had given to their regional managers or their bosses, their managers, anything like that was accurate to the data. Because a lot of people don't realize that these AI models, especially, the LLMs, the large language models, they're not programmed to be correct. They're programmed to give humans what we think should happen or should be there. And that's a very big problem with AI. And eventually we'll get to a point where it actually is quote unquote intelligent and does things properly and right. And we won't have to check over these things. But we're not quite there yet. We're bringing back jobs. We're going to have to shift our focus from, the more low level entry level jobs to more of a technical focused job. And even then, even when we do get to a point where AI can legitimately replace these jobs instead of just being equal to or better than humans, literally 3.75% of the time at best is what reports are saying right now. When we do eventually get to a point where AI can finally replace people, well, is that necessarily a bad thing? Sure, people are going to lose their jobs, but on the other hand, now we have a much more motivated work base to take the jobs that right now we have a shortage in. such as truck drivers and plumbers and electricians and pilots and all these other hands-on things that we've been needing literally for decades, because society has pushed this idea that you have to go to college and get a 4-year degree and work a white collar job. We don't, even though America is said to be a service based economy, we still have to have products in order to live in this country. So, I mean, we're gonna be okay. Is basically what I'm saying.
Right. Yes. And that's and that was my point as well, is that this again, historically speaking, economically speaking, you know, the technological advancement is not necessarily a bad thing. And by the way, to our listeners out there, this is coming from two people who could very well um, uh, be replaced, at least right now, by AI, doing data entry work, doing mid level but still data entry work that AI could do very well, and most of the time maybe even better. And but again, history, there has never been a point, I will reiterate, there has never been a point in history where where a technological advancement has taken away where it has made it harder to get a job in the United States, where it's led to a long-term economic downturn, or even long-term unemployment for the people who got replaced. Show me the economic recession, for when the two quarter million plus telephone operators were fired. Or maybe it wasn't quite that many, but tens of thousands at the very least, telephone operators were completely fired. Show me the economic recession that happened. You can't. Show me how the first industrial revolution led to a long-term economic downturn, and you can't. And the fact of the matter is, just like you said, when people this idea of infinite work, currently there's a large shortage in the blue collar world, a large shortage of plumbers, home builders, construction workers, uh, electricians, people who already right now are making six figures just out of apprenticeship. And I've talked to a couple construction companies myself, a couple of um, clients of mine, and they keep telling me that they can't find work, that nobody wants to work for them, because they would rather sit inside and do data entry, and get paid less oftentimes than get paid more, but they would have to do work outside. And, in my opinion, looking at this, I'm thinking, yeah, people could go more into these fields. Maybe it costs less to build a house, right? Maybe it costs less to get your plumbing done or your electricity done, um, because the labor in that market will no longer be as expensive, because there will be a lot more market entrants. And again, it also is a strike against the whole narrative of, you need to go to college, you need to get your 4-year degree, and you need to go work, in an office somewhere. Well, actually, with this advancement, the only reason that is, an option and even promoted, is because, you know there is no automation for that. Because up to 2021, we did not have AI to be able to come in and do data entry for us. And according to the data, we still don't have AI that can do that, at least not safely. Again, we're also dealing with security concerns from different AI models, from different LLMs, and data breaches. And so, all of these things work together. Just like Gartner said, employers are bringing these jobs back, and they're bringing them back in a more useful way, in a way that they can go out in a way that they can go out and help even more people rather than waste so much time doing the data entry, doing the regulation work, and doing all the work that nobody wants to do, but they have to do it. And so overall, again, coming from somebody who stands to lose his job over this, I'm saying, I think that we're going to be okay. That this is just another another checkbox in the technological advancement of modern day capitalism, and it is a good thing. I don't think that we would be better off had we never come up with the assembly line or the or mechanized construction, or the printing press. I think that we're going to be fine automating these simple tasks and moving forward.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that. Like you said, both of us do to some degree stand to lose our jobs for this because, you know, underwriting in itself is literally just data entry and analysis, right? And those are some of the things that early AI is being adopted for. I mean, my company, even though we haven't completely automated the underwriting and company research process, we're bringing that in. We're already at the point where we need fewer underwriters than we have. And so that's one of the main reasons why both of us are being moved now to a more relational, role, like we said. But even then, that's still making our jobs easier in that standpoint as well, because being able to use AI to get industry insight, so now you know what you're talking about when you go and meet a client or prospect, is very important. I mean, our prospecting process is now being shortened from an hour or 2 hours per prospect to 15 20 minutes. Of course, you got to then read the information. So we're seeing negatives on one hand, but we're also seeing the benefits, and I think that the benefits are in the long run definitely going to outweigh the bad. Now, again, that doesn't mean that people won't lose their jobs, and I'm sorry for those people that do, but we don't need to sit here and act like there isn't additional opportunity being opened up to us. And as things do get cheaper with the introduction of AI, as people move into more advanced, more technical, or more physical roles, hopefully they'll also start to see either prices go down or wages go up, preferably both. But that's not necessarily realistic. But if we do see that, then I think we're going to be in a much better position moving forward. We're already seeing it a little bit because even though right now Wall Street Journal is reporting that Gen Z, you know, young people our age and around our age are mostly opting out of buying homes, that then means that we have more money to put into other investments, and we're starting to prop up those markets, and we're going to be able to see some pretty good returns from them in the future. I mean, it says right here, the share of people 25 to 39 years old, excuse me, making annual transfers to investment accounts more than tripled between 2013 and 2023 to 14.4%. Mind you, 2013, way before we were seeing AI. So we already had this trend of houses getting wildly wildly costly, right? Wildly out of budget, and we were seeing things shift early on. So hopefully we're going to see some amount of a turn now. But you know even if we don't, I still think that there is a good possibility that because of the significantly larger production and value that is being added to the economy due to the existence of AI and assistance in a lot of roles, that we're going to eventually, get to a much better economic position for everyone.
Yes, certainly. Looking at that story of Gen Z and the I guess younger millennials, I should say, feeling locked out of the home market, and so they would rather throw their money into equities, into the into equities and bonds because they would see a larger return. Um, it that alone is an indictment of the housing market right now. Of you know Gen Z and the young people um, would rather essentially go gamble on specifically a trend right now, which is the growth of the market due to AI, chasing the whale, as we've discussed in the past. And they would rather do that than put their money into real estate because it's so bleak. The market itself is so bleak that it's um, it's wild. It's certainly an indictment of the real estate market. I think that it's unfortunate, and how this kind of carries itself from that AI story is, and I wanted to say it when you were talking about it earlier. You know, we really want to drive home, the economic fact of supply and demand, of this economic fact that, look, when something becomes cheaper to produce, uh, when something becomes cheaper to produce, and due to market forces, the price on the open market will decrease, um, and demand for that product, because the price decreases, will go up. Again, I will use automobiles as my example. When Ford and Dodge and even Mercedes Benz started making cars, nobody could afford a car. The cars were a luxury. When cars came out, people were largely still in horse and buggy. And then the assembly line came. And then we started mechanizing it even more. And now, everybody, pretty much everybody over the age of 16 has a car. Of course, by percentage. Obviously, there's a lot of people without one, but it's certainly more than it was then. And so my whole point of the analogy is to say that let's not forget how a natural deflation can happen of these goods and services when you incorporate a system that makes those goods and services cheaper to produce. And um, and hopefully that's what happens with housing, now that we're able to delegate some of these tasks that so many Americans are tasked with doing, some of these repetitive things, and they can go off and do something that maybe pays them more, or is more productive with their time. Then I believe everybody benefits. Obviously, everybody's benefited from these advancements in the past. And then getting back to this article, um, it there are already silver linings in the housing market. It is sad that people are so disenfranchised with the current state of the market that they would rather throw their money into equities and bonds. Again, for lack of a better term, they would rather gamble than go invest in the real estate market, because the real estate market in their mind is more volatile. Um, which that fact is something that is certainly new in my mind. There is some good news. Inventories of homes on the market uh, are starting to increase. Of course, month over month, it's a decrease, but year over year, inventories are starting to increase. We're seeing a month over month 8.4% decrease in existing home sales, um, which is a 3.91, which is a decrease year over year as well. Now, again, the price of the median house did trickle up, but like Nyanki and I discussed, this could lead to seller concessions. Again, we're talking about the time the inventory time on the market has also increased. Um, I believe, and it varies from survey to survey, from 44 to 49 days. And uh, and so the longer a house is on the market, maybe the seller concedes a little bit because they need to get their home sold. Um, only so many people are willing to sit on an unsold property, especially if it's somebody like a home builder. And so, we're starting to see some good news. We're starting to see also a lot of the people who have all of the homes starting to realize that, hey, maybe this is a bubble. Maybe my home isn't worth what I thought it was worth. Um, maybe I should lower my price because the market doesn't seem to believe me. And so all of these things are working together. I think that, and again, with overall affordability getting better in the market, inflation going down to 2.4%. Things are looking better. I think that going forward, I hope this trend continues, and maybe we can see some real progress out of the housing market.
Yeah, you touched on a lot of good points there. I did, briefly at least pull up that article that we were talking about. That information, those numbers that he was given, comes from the National Association of Realtors. They are basically the big wig people that are in charge of keeping up with all the licensed real estate agents and things like that, and the brokers. And so they have direct access to the number of homes sold, how many realtors are selling homes, and how many, prices, MLS, which is multiple listing site. I think I don't remember quite what the S is in MLS, but all this information that they've aggregated and put together is painting on one hand a little bit of a dreary thing, because as we saw, home sales are down 8 something percent. 42, I think, is the right number percent of realtors didn't even sell a home last year. So we're getting to this point where houses are so unaffordable that people overall, not even just Gen Z and young millennials, but overall people are struggling to buy houses. On the other hand, because of that supply demand thing, read Basic Economics by Thomas Sowell. Got to plug that book. Uh, but because of the demand, because people aren't buying houses because they're so affordable, right? Dropping, then now, like you said, individual sellers, home builders, they even, rent apartment rent prices in commercial buildings for some degree has to go down as well to meet people where they are. And so on an individual scale, with these homes, I'm seeing homes on the market that have been there for 1, 2, 3. Some of these homes even originally being listed back in August that are still on the market, and those are where you're going to find your best deals. Because, like Matt said, the longer these homes sit on the market, the more these sellers are paying just to have no one in them. They're not making rent money off of these. They're not living in them themselves. Most of them are empty, right? So they're still having to pay their mortgage, or if the home is paid off, still having to pay property taxes. So there are still costs associated with owning a quote unquote empty house. And the longer these things sit on the market, the more they're going to be ready to negotiate with you. Let's say if the home is listed at $300,000, well, they listed it 3 months ago. Maybe they're willing to come off $30,000 on the price because it's just been on the market for so long. And those things are something that is not quite captured, because this NAR data is actually only from sold homes. It doesn't count the ones that are still on market and have continually gotten pricing decreases. So with that in mind, you're going to have a lot of leverage negotiating with your seller. And even if they're not willing to move on the price that much, like Matt mentioned, you can get seller concessions depending on the type of mortgage you're getting. It can be, I want to say, up to 3% concessions maximum for an FHA loan, or 6% for a conventional. Um, I think that's actually a graduated rate depending on the down payment that you put. But even then, there are other programs that you can look into as well. Down payment assistance programs, first time home buyer programs through your state or even through your lender. You know, some large companies, Wells Fargo, for example, they do a grant in many areas for first time home buyers that finance through their bank. You know, get their mortgage through Wells Fargo. So there are additional resources that you can take advantage of to make getting a house more affordable for you. And I just hope that we're able to do it because at this point, because sellers are more willing to negotiate on the price, because they're more willing to give a good amount of concessions, because because mortgage rates are dipping a little bit now. Overall, even though the average sale price, so to speak, of the house did increase by 0.9% or whatever it was, the amount of money actually changing hands at the table is less. You know, because those mortgage rates are lower, you're paying your monthly payment is going to be lower over time. If you're able to get the down payment assistance or these seller concessions, now you're bringing less cash to close. So even if you don't have, 5, 10, 20% of the home value plus another 10 to 15,000 for your appraisal and your title fees and your inspection and all these other things, because those seller concessions are covering those, you can show up with $3, $4,000 and get a home. Of course, that's not going to be the same everywhere. It depends on your local home market, because New York, for example, is going to be more expensive than West Virginia. Um, so just take a look around, speak to your local realtors, people that know the market where you are, and ask them what's going on. What are they seeing? How can you, with where you are right now, or even in a year or two, how can you get to where you need to be in terms of credit score, in terms of financial stability? Also, get in contact with a financial advisor or banker about that. How you can actually get into a home as these prices continue to trend favorably. I won't necessarily say drop because it's not quite happening yet, but as things start to get to a more favorable trend.
Yes, certainly a good point there. Get in touch with a financial professional and see how you can build, like you had mentioned, your credit score. See how you can build your savings, your portfolio, and essentially what you can do, what is available to you, to what tools you have to build those assets for yourself. And again, we're honest on the show. It's hard. We're not saying that it's not hard. um, while there's positive signs in inflation and the price of homes and general affordability, it it's got a long ways to go. Certainly to match what it was like in previous decades, and or even at the beginning of this one. um, and so it's got a long ways to go, but it's important that we remember that throwing a pity party, feeling sorry for ourselves, it's not going to help anybody. Again, coming from two people who actually also live in this economy and have to make ends meet, just like the rest of the young people, not being able to afford a house, having to cut down on food just to afford groceries and things like that. It's not going to do us any good if we sit here and constantly complain about it and not say, okay, it's bad, but these are the tools that I have. Over a long enough period, I think I can do it. I think I can make it work. Um, and again, that is not an endorsement of the economy. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It's saying that in spite of the economy's difficulties, it's important that we persevere and it's important that we push on. Again, another positive, another silver lining is that, according to the National Association of Realtors, um, their housing affordability index has shown that houses are the most affordable that they've been since March of 2022. And now that doesn't really say much about March of 2022, but uh, it's in large part because wages are outpacing inflation, and so that's good. Nominal wages are outpacing, month over month and year over year inflation, and so real wages are actually growing. And this is good news. You have to take the good, look at the glass half full, and again, take your tools, speak to your banker or speak to your financial professional, um, a realtor, or even just maybe a family friend who may be able to help you and maybe give you the guidance you need to say, okay, this is how you can do it. Let's build a budget. Let's look at what you're spending, how you're spending it, and let's go forward from there. Yeah, and maybe even have a conversation about your career path. Say, all right, so where do you want to be in 5 years? And really be honest with yourself. Have that conversation and say, hey, maybe you're at a road, maybe you're at a place right now in your professional life where you're thinking to yourself, I don't have a plan. I'm just kind of here. I'm I'm I do my job not really because I'm motivated to go anywhere, but because it pays the bills. And that's not saying anything bad about people who maybe are like that. That's saying, what let's start having that conversation about, hey, maybe look for something that you are interested in and try to progress in that field. And because that can benefit you in what we're talking about right now, which is, in the long run, getting yourself a house, building up your savings, and again, the essence of the show, putting yourself in a better spot financially for yourself, for your families, and for your kids, and try to navigate how difficult it has gotten. There are silver linings. We just have to look for them.
100% correct. You've mentioned a couple times now inflation. Obviously, the 2020 2026 January inflation report has come out, and we've got a little bit of information on that as well. The consumer price index, CPI, inflation, colloquially, it says prices rose 2.4% annually in January. Yes, this is still high, but it's less than expected. Um, we're seeing right here the consumer price index for January accelerated 2.4% from the same time a year ago, down zero point 0.3 percentage points from the prior month, December. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reported on Friday. That pulled the inflation rate down to where it was the month after President Donald Trump in April 2025 announced aggressive tariffs on U.S. imports. What this means is that we thought that things were going to be worse than they are. Sure, any inflation is bad, but there is still what we consider to be a normal rate of inflation, which the Federal Reserve says is about 2%. So we're still above where we want to be, but we're not nearly as bad as we thought it was. We thought that things are going to be around 2.7, 2.9%. We, meaning economists, thought that it was going to be around that point. So we're seeing a better economic recovery than we thought we would see at this point. And as you know, gas has been going down. It's not right now. It's not at the lowest level that it was recently, but things are getting significantly more affordable. given, as you said earlier, Matt, that real wages are increasing relative to inflation.
Yes, exactly. And that's the key word there, right? Is real. Of course, even during the Biden administration, and then even during the first Trump administration, we kept hearing, "Oh, wages are going up." Well, that's all well and good, but how are wages doing against inflation? Because that's what really matters. The words, nominal versus real. Um, and
Go
these
ahead
are
and explain those two terms.
nominal wage. That's when say you get a just on a personal level real quick, because it will make it easier. You get a pay raise from $19 to $20 an hour, right? And that's a nominal wage increase. Now a real wage increase, you see that 19 to $20 an hour, and but you subtract the amount of the amount of uh, you subtract the amount of money it takes to buy the same basket of goods. um, so again you say, okay, well, my wage went up, let's say 5%, 19 to $20 an hour, but the same basket of goods and services that I used to live on and still live on, well, they went up 3% in the last year. Well, now you used to have you do have a nominal wage increase of 5%, but your real wage increase is 2%. Why? Because even though your wage went up by 5%, the amount of money it takes to buy the same basket of goods went up 3%. And therefore you're left with that 2% gap. And that's your real wage growth. And that's what we've seen in this market right now is real wages are outpacing inflation. And that's good news. That means that wages, at least right now, have gone up over 2.4%. Um, and it varies source to source on how much over 2.4%, but they've all generally agreed that it is, outpacing inflation. Another point that I wanted to bring up in this article, that's important to note, is that CPI, it takes in, again, a basket of goods that usually the average family of four ends up consuming on a yearly basis. But it also includes those goods like gas and energy and things of that sort, more volatile goods that in volatile in price that change often. Again, oil prices change often on the market. Um, and so excluding those from the CPI, CNBC reports that actually, if you exclude those, the core CPI, which is what that's called when you take out those volatile items, you call it the core CPI. It was actually down zero point 0.3 percentage points from December as well, which is the lowest point that it's been since 2021, April of 2021. Um, and it now again it was up year over year 2.5%, but it that's still the lowest increase we've seen since April of 2021, which is an important point to be made. uh, Again, because it's excluding the outliers essentially. One of the reasons why we use median versus mean sometimes in home prices, well, there's a lot of very, very expensive homes. In wages, there's a lot of very, very expensive or very, very wealthy people in the world. But and so using mean, we're going to get a higher number versus using median, meaning the most amount of the right there in the middle wage, hence the name median. And so I think that's really important to note. Of course, you have to scroll past the headlines a little bit to see it. But again, trying to look at the positive outlook here. Um, and I I think this is a good start, certainly for 2026. I think that going forward, if we continue on the path that we're going on, and speaking of housing, again, my personal opinion, I think that maybe if we roll back a little bit of the housing regulations, maybe look into, as we've discussed previously, Wall Street in the housing market, and look into the Airbnb problem that my co-host and I have discussed in the past. Looking at how we can kind of control those situations, maybe there could be some real change in the housing market. The that NAR article also talked about the lack of supply in the housing market, which has a lot to do with how expensive it is to build houses because of the regulation. These starter homes, these 150, 125, $100,000 houses, those are no longer a thing. A thing meaning they're no longer being built like they used to be built in
Thank the
mass.
government for excessive regulation.
Right, because the regulation is so large. There's so much. It's so expensive to build those that it's simply not worth it. And of course, inflation got so out of control that it would simply lose companies money if they sold those houses, if they built them and sold them the way that the government wants them to through regulation. So I think there's a lot of actions that can be done here. I think that we're doing a good job so far, but I think there's a lot more to be done. Um, and again, the theme of this show, I think, is you got to look at the silver lining. You have to see that there's still a point in going forward. You know, uh, stay economically and politically active. Take these stories to heart. Take the economy to heart, and let that shape how you change your society. But also go out into the world not with a heavy heart, but with a hopeful heart that you can change your life for the better, and use these examples as fuel.
Yeah, exactly. I think you summarized things very well at the end. There actually was something else that I wanted to throw in and mention, but I can't even remember what it was now. It might come to me eventually. Um,
Right.
but like you said, here's the big picture, right? AI is changing the workforce, but not quite in the doom and gloom way that the headline suggests. The housing market is finally softening in ways that can actually benefit us, Gen Z, young millennials. That is the potential patient buyer, right? And inflation is starting to trend in the right direction, even if the Fed isn't quite ready to celebrate just yet. As always, the best thing you can do is to stay informed and stay ahead of the curve. For my co host and me, if you like the episode, please leave a like and a comment to be featured on the next video. And be sure to tune in every week to stay on the road to riches. Thanks for watching.